Hi, welcome back. This is Joe Rabil with Rabil Stock Research. So in today's lesson, to start the show, I'm going to go over something in MACD that I haven't discussed before, and that's going up to a bigger time frame to give us a huge edge to be able to anticipate a move in a stock. All right, so that's number one. Number two, I am going to go through some specific screens that I like to use in ACP. And then also I want to go through what the rates look like, as well as a commodity chart that I think looks very interesting. Once we do that, we'll go through some symbol requests that came through. Let's go ahead and get into this lesson now. Okay, so I want to focus in on MACD. I'm going to keep everything else up on the screen because I'm going to reference a few things, but I want to focus in on the MACD, and I want to focus in on the MACD on the monthly chart. Okay, but to first explain what I'm looking at, I'm going to show you on the weekly chart how this pattern can develop in any time frame. So if you notice here, we have a bottom in place in SU. This is Suncor Energy on the weekly chart. We make a low, we rally up, a definitive rally, we make another pivot and turn back down. And then as we're turning back up, if you notice, the MACD actually makes a lower low right at the zero line. Okay, so it's a nice combination. The zero line reversal by itself is important, but if we get a lower low in MACD while price is making a higher low, there's a pretty strong likelihood that we're going to get to see some continuation to the upside. All right, I like this pattern when it has a low ADX condition in place as well. All right, so we want to be on the lookout for that. Now, I talk about this a lot in my courses, and I go through this in detail. And, you know, it's the type of thing where you have to get used to seeing it. If you notice here, we made a higher low in price and we make a lower low in MACD. Another example of that. Okay. Now, what I wanted to point out on the monthly chart, and I'm going to zero in on this, is you make a move to the downside to rally up, you come back down. Again, you make a higher low while MACD is making a lower low. Now, this is a early warning sign. When it happens on the monthly chart, we can start to we want to put this on our watch list. We want to start watching because we're going to look for signs on the smaller time frames like a weekly chart, like I showed you, where it's going to trigger into place. All right. It might take a few months. Sometimes it kicks in right away if it happens right at the zero line. Other times it takes a little bit more time to kind of marinate and get itself going. So you want to be aware of this because as I tell my subscribers all the time, you want to think like a chess player and think 3 moves in advance. And this is one way to do that, is this specific indicator happening on this specific pattern developing on a monthly chart. It gives you early warning to get ready. All right, let me just show you a few other examples. So if we look at something like Costco, now this is another one where on the monthly chart, we made a higher bottom right at the bottom at the beginning of 2023. And this was clearly making lower lows. All right. Now, it ended up taking a few months to get going, but we can go down to the weekly chart, look for signs of a reversal, signs of a breakout, signs of strength. In this case, it was a breakout pattern. But we want to be on the lookout for that when we see this taking place on the monthly chart, right? You had a couple months to get yourself prepared, get yourself ready, put in alarms, put the alerts in, and make sure you knew what you were going to plan, what the trade plan was going to be. Let's look at another one. So something like Goldman Sachs, similar situation. Now this one is kind of like my favorite when it develops this way. So if you notice, again, we make a slightly higher high, but look at the higher low, but look at the lower low and right at the zero line. This is a great combination when you have a zero line reversal with low ADX and it happens to be a reverse divergence. This is one where you want to start taking a really hard look as this is bouncing off 300 and be on the lookout for signs of a reversal. Okay, so this pattern is going to give you this early warning, and then you could go down, and if you wanted to be aggressive, you could even look for it off of a daily entry, something like that. As long as we don't have any downside momentum on the weekly, you can be more aggressive on the daily chart. Look at something like Travelers. So here's another example on the monthly chart. We came down, made a low, we rallied up, and we made a higher low, slightly higher low, but it was a lower low. And then we made a definitively lower low here, and we had low ADX in place. From that point, we can start to look for signs on the smaller time frames to give us an entry as this is bottoming out near the 40-month moving average, okay? Give you another example. Let's look at something like American Express. Again, look at how this formed higher low while this was making a lower low right near the zero line with low ADX. Okay, it's a great combination. And again, then we can go and do our work on the smaller time frames. I'm not saying that we're going to buy off of this, but it's going to give us a month or two. Most of the time, it gives you kind of like a month or two early warning to be on the lookout for signs of buying stepping in on the smaller time frames. And then finally, I'll just show you another example. If you notice, I've shown you all different sectors in these examples. It's not just one specific area, but look at what's going on in this basic materials stock. So clearly make a higher bottom while this makes a lower low right near the zero line with low ADX after showing a lot of strength to the upside here. We want to be on the lookout for, as my subscribers were, and we talked about, was this was starting to emerge here based on this bigger picture pattern developing. We knew to be on the lookout and be ready for it. All right. So use this to your advantage. You can create a watch list of stocks that are kind of setting up this way. You just have to be patient. You have to stalk the stocks that are doing this, and you can't lose track of them. You got to keep them in a special watch list and make sure you go through them on a regular basis. If you're enjoying the content, hit that like button and also subscribe. So my services can be found at rabilstockresearch.com. I'm on the services page right now just to show you've got the advanced trend and momentum courses. So each one you can buy individually now. I'm providing lifetime access to those. Or you could buy as a bundle if you want at a slight discount. Also show the individual package, which has 3 reports each, 2 to 3 reports each week, plus a special video for that package that you can also take a look at. If you're interested in just getting started, you can go to the book, and I am offering it at a discount right now. I'm going to start out with the scans. I did want to show a few examples of 2 screens I like to run. Number one, I call it an opposing trend setup. And let me just, I'm going to run the scan, and you'll see we'll get the results here in a second. And it's going through the entire database as opposed to, you can set this up. Now, I got 62 stocks that passed. Now, if you did it and just did like the S&P, you'd get a smaller list. So if you start with a list, you can do that. Maybe start with the S&P or something like that. But what we're looking for, and this is a weekly daily version, if you take this information, I'm going to show you in a second what the scan is, but or the details of the scan. But what we're basically trying to find is an uptrend on the weekly and a opposing trend where the 18 is below the 40 on the daily, right? So this is kind of trending to the upside, and this is going in the opposite direction. And so that's, to me, that's like the basic pullback setup. We've got an uptrend that we're trying to buy a pullback in. It's being defined by, a reversal of the trend on the daily chart. So we look for that. It's a good starting point. So that's essentially what's passing here. Now, what I've done, and what I would do is pause this and take a snapshot of this if you want to use this screen. Now, I've just done a volume and a market cap screen, but again, you could put in just the S&P list and run it, and I think it'll probably give you a more manageable list. The other thing you can do is this low ADX scan. Now, again, I've done it just with volume and market cap. Okay, you can switch that so you don't have to look at as many stocks. There's a lot of stocks that are going to pass this, and what I've done is a weekly ADX scan that's just a simple 1414 is below 20. All right, now why do I do this? When I use a 13.8 for my ADX, I like this, and I've always used this 14 line. It's a slower line. If it's under 20, then we know that the high probability is that the 8 ADX will be low, but it's a smoother line. I mean, one of the things I learned from Linda Raschke is when this ADX 14 gets down to about 15, you should be on the lookout for a reversal. So I just kind of look at anything under 20. Again, it's a bigger list. You can shrink it down by starting with a different universe. But those are a couple of scans that I would lean on if I'm using ADX. There, you can make it more sophisticated so you don't have to look at as many stocks if you want. But I like to go through more stocks, build a list, and that's the way I go about it now. Okay, let's switch over. I want to talk about a few things. We're going to talk about the 10-year yield, number one, and then I'm going to go into the commodity index. So, first of all, one thing that I want to point out here is that if you look at the longer term trend, we're still in an uptrend. We successfully held the 18-month line, which is above a rising 40. All right. Now, it does look like it's lost a little momentum, but look at the ADX strength. Okay. This is still in a pretty strong trend. Now, I've been thinking that we're kind of going to be kind of range bound, but this chart doesn't say that that has to be the case. In fact, if we look at this a little bit more closely, you can see what's developing here. We've got a reverse divergence developing on this time frame, right? So, I mean, you start to be on the lookout for this hidden divergence. A lot of people call it. I just call it reverse divergence, where your price is making a higher low and the MACD is making a lower low. Now, that to me is this bias. Now, if you go and look at what the weekly has done now, we've moved up, we've turned both of the moving averages up, and now we've pulled back and look like we're successfully holding these two moving averages with a pinch play and green DI holding. So I've got to sort of respect this somewhat. And if you also see what's taking place, MACD is crossing the signal line and the zero line, and we're moving up. Now, I would think that something like that is probably more likely for if we wanted to play this as a trading play. And, obviously you would probably go looking at, one of the ETFs that it is actually the bonds and play it in the opposite direction. But the point I'm making here is that it looks to me like the rates want to carry a little bit higher in the near term. Now, maybe they only make it up to 475 or 480 and maybe test the high at 5 or something like that. But in the near term, I got to sort of respect what's taking place in the pullback and the higher time frame strength with the reverse divergence showing up. All right, look at this commodity index, which is kind of interesting that this is playing out this way. Because we're looking at this situation where we had this massive move to the upside and we've been consolidating, and look at how this is forming a reverse divergence on the monthly. Now, again, as I said in the lesson, it could take a little bit of time here to get going, but we've got some improvement in MACD here. We've got kind of a low ADX condition in this position. I think if this can break out through 24, we'd probably have to respect it. Obviously, the bigger breakout area is a little bit higher, up around 2450. So just something to be, another one to be on the lookout for. Now, I'm not sure that the commodity and the rates are going to go up at the same time. So, it could be a situation where this consolidates a little bit more, but just play them independent. Look at these patterns, and they are pretty attractive patterns. From the way I look at the world. So we need a breakout in this, I think, with the low ADX pattern that's developed on the daily chart, but certainly something that caught my eye when I went through these. Switching over to the symbols, I'm going to start with QQQ. And one of the things I've been talking about is the respect we need to have for this RSI buy signal, because it happened from an deep oversold condition, right? Deep oversold, and RSI 20 stayed well above. When I see that, I tend to want to have respect for, an ensuing rally. Now, what was bothering me about this was the relative strength, but as I mentioned over the last few weeks, it was only a warning sign because this moving average has never rolled over. That's what we're looking for. We're actually looking for the opposite to take place in the IWM. And I think what that would mean, if we got this to roll, just so you understand where I'm coming from, if we got this to roll over and we got the IWM's 30-week of its RS to turn to the upside, right, then I think what you'd have is these large mega cap stocks maybe start to underperform for a little bit, and you'd have a lot more other symbols that are playing better versus the market overall. So that's just something I'm watching like a hawk right now. The fact that we have rallied up in a pretty strong way, says that is probably not going to happen right now. The other thing that I would mention here is that in the most recent action, we have gotten the ADX above this 25 level. And I think that's strong enough for this to be able to hold on a pullback. So I wouldn't be looking for a quick reversal. If it is going to reverse, I think it's going to take time. The odds are the next pullback is going to cause another move to the upside, at least a test, maybe even a higher high. IWM is a little frustrating. And when I look at the pattern itself, I don't dislike this pattern. What I dislike is the fact that we're not seeing this improvement on a relative basis. And this is what I was alluding to when I was talking about the QQQ. We really want to see this turn up and the moving average of the relative strength to turn up. And that improves the overall environment. It doesn't mean that this can't go up, right? We could see this moving higher, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we've got a broad expansion in place. And that's really what we're on the lookout for, is a relative improvement in that line. Okay, let's look at a couple of individual symbols that came through. So we're getting this pullback in Disney. Let's start with the monthly. I think this is a little too violent, right? I like the turnaround that's developing here, right? We're getting the 18-month to cup around, but they got two big red bars that have developed. We don't only have a couple days left in the month. So two big red bars on the way down. It kind of means to me that I want to see this prove itself at this level. And then if we go and look at what's going on the weekly chart, we had a pretty nasty, pretty big red bar. I think we have to see how this handles the zero line on the weekly MACD. If we come down and we can bounce off that, I think it'll take probably a double bottom of some sort in the MACD and in price. The momentum signs on the weekly are still pretty good based on the ADX. I think this could survive here. It's a question of how long it takes. And I don't want to be the first guy here at 100 just stepping in. I want this to prove itself somewhat. So I don't necessarily want it to go diving in until I get signs of buyers stepping back in. All right, let's look at ALB. So the problem I've got with this is we're below a declining 18-month. It doesn't mean that we can't get a rally here. All right, we could rally for sure. We're coming down to pretty big support at 100, but the rally is likely to lead to more retracement, more sideways, more whatever. So the only way I could play this is for a retracement back to the 18-month, which is around 175. Now, if I'm going to do that, I have a low ADX pattern that's trying to develop here, but to me, it's not that well developed. The MACD is moving up, and this is going the opposite direction. What is this? This is a reverse divergence to the downside. You see what I mean? It's not really what we want to see. Now, one thing that could take place is if this goes longer, then we'll have a low ADX condition. We can look for a breakout play. All right, but we don't have that yet, so I wouldn't even be looking for the daily chart yet. I want this to go sideways for a longer period of time without breaking down. If it can do that, then we could have a low ADX condition. Usually we're looking for about 25 bars where ADX is low, and we don't have that yet. It's going to take another month or two to get in that position. Okay, now look at what this IPI is doing. Now, we're going to start with the monthly chart like I typically like to do. You see how we're crossing the 18-month here? So it's an encouraging sign. It's not a bullish sign, but it's encouraging because we had this declining 18-month. We've been fighting, and now we're back above that. Now, again, I don't mean it to be a buy signal, but what it does for me is it says, look, if the weekly and the daily start to look better, I'm okay with playing this for a move. I would be playing it with daily risk if I'm going to do that. But I do like what's going on here. We've got some improvement. Look at the green DI. You see how that's breaking out above all these levels here? I mean, that's pretty significant. It's causing the blue line, the ADX line, to rise. What we want is a higher low to form, some kind of a test of support, and then look for a turn from there. I think this could be a potential trading play on a pullback. Definitely worth watching. All right, IREN. I kind of like what's going on here. It's sort of interesting. It's been working sideways for a pretty long period of time. Now, it does kind of look like this is just another rally in this pattern. But if you look at the way this played out, we had pretty strong ADX, and it's been consolidating back. These have been working together, and now it looks like it's emerging. So you see how this was? I want to make sure you get this. Let me just zero in on this a little bit more. So we have a high here in DI, and then we make a lower high, another lower high, another lower high, but then we made a higher high. Do you see how we just made a higher high? To me, that's a sign that this might be getting ready to expand again. We just went through a contraction phase, and now it looks like we're getting ready to expand again. So I'd be willing to look for a pullback in this based on that criteria and the fact that the ADX is breaking out with really good volume on the daily chart. So definitely worth watching from that standpoint. Okay, CNQ. So this is all about energy and oil. Is oil going to survive here? We have to see oil show some signs of life. If it does, the stock trades really well. Now, if I'm looking at this just from a trigger standpoint, I kind of want to see this come back up through this peak here, sort of this area here. We have a low ADX condition in place. We need a little bit of a breakout in this pattern. Overall, it looks good, and I think it looks really good relative to its peers. LYG, this is a pretty big turnaround. I kind of like the looks of it. It needs entry again. I highlighted this in my reports back in here. It's made a little bit of a move up now. I'd like to get a little bit of a pullback a little closer to the breakout area. And that's probably what I'd be watching for in that instance. Okay, look at this VNDA. So, if you look at it on a daily chart, you start to get interested, wouldn't you? I mean, we got improvement here. We're crossing above here. We're showing signs that the moving averages are turning. Everything is looking a little bit more interesting on this time frame. But if we start with the higher time frame, you recognize that this it's not ready. I just don't think this is ready yet. It's had a tail last month. It looks like it's forming another tail this month. So be really careful with this. I personally think we're going to need this to move up and come back down and then turn back up. And maybe the next time it can get back through the 18-month line and look a little bit more attractive. Thanks for watching today. So if you have any stock requests, you can send them to stocktalk@stockcharts.com, or you can just put them in the comment area. And also my YouTube channel is called Invest Like a Pro. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.